Every morning at precisely 0600 hours, Sergeant Olivia Keller unfolded her weathered camping chair on the rooftop of Forward Operating Base Sentinel in the dusty outskirts of Kandahar Province. From this perch, she methodically cleaned her M24 sniper rifle as the Afghan sun painted the mountains gold. The ritual never varied: strong black coffee from a dented thermos, classical music through a single earbud, and meticulous preparation for another day of overwatch and reconnaissance. At 29, Olivia had chosen this remote deployment precisely because nobody here questioned her methods or her solitary nature. The Marines genuinely respected her. She was steady under pressure, eerily accurate with her shots, and never sought glory or recognition. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. What they didn't know was that their quiet reconnaissance specialist had graduated from MIT with honors in applied physics, served in classified operations across 3 continents, and once held specialized clearance for experimental ballistics technology development, the kind of clearance that came with its own security detail. But the cocky new lieutenants fresh from Quantico often dismissed her behind her back. To them, she was just another female Marine who couldn't possibly understand the mathematical complexities of extreme long-range shooting or the psychological fortitude required for precision kills. Olivia had learned to ignore their whispers and sidelong glances. One particularly memorable Thursday, she helped Captain Marcus Harrington adjust his scope on a malfunctioning Barrett rifle that the armory couldn't fix. A smart-mouthed lieutenant, some Ivy League graduate with more theory than field experience, joked loudly, "Hey lady, you sure you're not just following the manual for that weapon system?" Olivia smiled softly and said nothing. Then she calmly removed the scope, made a precise 3.7 milliradian adjustment to the elevation turret, and replaced it with steady hands. Captain Harrington's next shot hit center mass on a target 200 meters distant that had been consistently pulling right for days. "How did you know to do that?" Harrington asked, genuinely impressed. "Just experience," she replied quietly. What nobody saw was the custom-designed ballistics computer she kept locked in her private quarters, encrypted with cutting-edge biometric access. She only opened it late at night, when the base was asleep, the screen displaying complex atmospheric modeling algorithms, proprietary trajectory analysis software, and sophisticated optical calibration systems that would make DARPA researchers envious. The Marines in her unit saw nothing more than a competent sniper who hit her targets and filed concise reports. They had absolutely no idea they were working alongside one of the most mathematically gifted ballistics experts the Marine Corps had ever recruited, a woman who could calculate wind drift compensation in her head faster than most computers. But Olivia genuinely preferred it this way. She was completely done with proving herself to anyone. 8 years of carefully constructed military identity had given her something she'd never had in her previous classified role: simplicity. The freedom to focus solely on the precision of each shot without the burden of explaining her methodologies to skeptical superior officers. That simplicity was about to be shattered. Late that Thursday afternoon, as she was cataloging ammunition in the armory, her secure satellite phone vibrated with an incoming transmission. The caller's voice was tense, using outdated call signs and speaking in clipped, measured phrases. Something about his cadence made her instinctively uneasy, but she acknowledged the coordinates he provided. Echo Actual requests Nightshade support at grid reference Kilo 7903. Confirm receipt. This is Sierra 11. Receipt confirmed. Olivia responded automatically, muscle memory from years of covert operations taking over. Time frame? Immediate. Dust off unavailable. Situation critical. As she gathered her gear and requisitioned a vehicle for the mission, Olivia had no idea that this routine support call would drag her back into a world she'd spent 3 years trying to forget. A world where her classified call sign Nightshade was supposed to be buried in redacted mission reports. But some secrets refused to stay buried. The remote village sat nestled in a valley that barely appeared on military maps. As Olivia approached in her Humvee, accompanied only by a young corporal named Reynolds who'd volunteered to drive, something immediately felt wrong. The village was too quiet, the normally bustling market completely deserted, as if everyone had received advance warning of something dangerous approaching. The nervous liaison officer who met them at the village perimeter introduced himself only as Miller and refused to provide unit identification. He mumbled something about a high-value target and walked away quickly, disappearing into an abandoned schoolhouse before she could ask detailed questions. As Olivia began setting up her observation post on a low ridge overlooking the village center, she immediately noticed something that made her blood run cold. A distinctive pattern of small mirror flashes from 3 separate buildings, using a signal sequence she recognized instantly. This particular pattern was only used by Shadow Operations Group, an ultra-classified direct action team that officially didn't exist. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her scope, scanning the deserted streets and alleyways. Hidden carefully within the village's central well, she spotted something even more disturbing. A modified surveillance drone with specialized acoustic sensors, the kind used exclusively by covert intelligence gathering units. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Attached to the drone was a small metallic disc with precise military markings etched into its surface. NS-7 Scimitar Red. NS-7. Nightshade 7. Her old operational designation from a program that was supposedly decommissioned years ago. The disc slipped from her shaking fingers, clattering onto the rocky ground. For 3 years she'd been Staff Sergeant Olivia Keller, a highly specialized reconnaissance sniper serving with the 1st Marine Expeditionary Force. During one catastrophically failed operation in the classified location, 4 of her closest teammates had died horrible deaths because someone in intelligence had given them fatally inaccurate information about enemy force strength and positions. Olivia had barely survived, taking a bullet through her shoulder and spending 6 months in rehabilitation. The guilt and trauma had nearly destroyed her. She'd transferred units, changed specialties slightly, and deliberately disappeared into the anonymous ranks of conventional military forces. She'd requested 3 consecutive deployments to increasingly remote forward operating bases, looking for assignments where nobody would ask questions about her past. She thought she had successfully buried Nightshade 7 forever in the predictable routines of a standard reconnaissance unit. Apparently Nightshade wasn't finished with her yet. She didn't tell Corporal Reynolds about her discovery when he returned with supplies. She didn't tell Captain Miller when he radioed for a situation report. She simply slipped the mysterious disc into her pocket and continued setting up her observation post with methodical precision. That night, after ensuring her position was secure and Reynolds was keeping watch, she extracted a specialized communications module from her equipment bag, standard issue for snipers, but hers had been modified in ways the Marine Corps supply officer would never recognize. With trembling fingers, she entered the alphanumeric sequence from the disk into her encrypted system. After several tense seconds, the small screen flickered and displayed a chilling message. Nightshade operative confirmed. Hamlet protocol activated. Prairie fire imminent. Immediate extraction required. Olivia immediately shut down the communication system, removed the cryptographic module, and methodically buried it beneath a small pile of rocks behind her position. The cold night air bit at her face as she stared out across the darkened valley, processing what she'd just learned. She knew exactly what prairie fire meant. It was the code word for an imminent, overwhelming attack by superior enemy forces. The same code word that had been used in her final mission with the Scimitar team, just before everything went catastrophically wrong. The same people who had promised her that Nightshade was officially decommissioned. The same people who had sworn that her classified past would never follow her to these remote mountains where she'd finally found some measure of peace in the simplicity of her role. But judging by that ominous message, people were going to die if she didn't act on this intelligence. As she stared up at the star-filled Afghan sky, Olivia realized that by sunrise this quiet village would become a killing field. Based on the Hamlet protocol designation, she knew exactly what kind of operation was underway. A high-level assassination mission targeting someone hidden in this village, someone important enough to risk significant American military assets. And based on her prior experience, she knew the kind of dangerous visitors who would follow, the kind who arrive without warning, eliminate their targets with extreme prejudice, and disappear like ghosts, leaving civilians to face the inevitable retribution that follows. At exactly 0430 hours, her thermal scope detected the first signs of movement. not from the village but from the surrounding ridgelines. Dozens of heat signatures moving with tactical discipline, establishing overlapping fields of fire around the entire village perimeter. Olivia had been expecting something like this. She'd spent the sleepless night preparing, calculating fields of fire, identifying optimal engagement positions, and establishing multiple fallback routes. Her carefully constructed peaceful military career was about to be torn apart, but at least she wouldn't face this threat unprepared. She gently shook Corporal Reynolds awake, noting the confusion in his young face as she briefed him with the calm precision that had become her trademark. "We have multiple hostiles establishing positions on all surrounding ridgelines. I count at least 60 distinct heat signatures, possibly more concealed by terrain features. They're setting up a perfect ambush perimeter." Reynolds peered through his binoculars, his face paling as he spotted the first confirmation of her assessment, the glint of a machine gun being positioned on the northern ridge. "Sir, that's not Taliban. Their movements are too disciplined, too coordinated." "No," Olivia agreed quietly. "They're not Taliban, and they're not here for us. They're here for whoever's hiding in that village." She made a quick decision. "Reynolds, I need you to get back to the Humvee and radio for immediate air support. Authentication code Sierra Tango 9-73. Specify Prairie Fire Protocol." The young corporal looked confused. "Ma'am, that's a Tier 1 emergency extraction code. How do you even know?" "Just do it, Corporal. Now." As Reynolds scrambled down the ridge toward their vehicle, Olivia continued her methodical scan of the surroundings. Her trained eye counted not 60, but 91 distinct enemy combatants establishing firing positions around the village. Their equipment wasn't standard Taliban issue. They carried modern tactical gear, advanced optical systems, and were deploying with a level of sophistication that suggested extensive professional training. Whoever they were, they weren't ordinary insurgents. They were highly trained mercenaries or special forces from another country, here for something or someone of extraordinary value. Olivia settled into her shooting position, the familiar weight of the M24 against her shoulder bringing a strange calm. Her mind automatically calculated distance, elevation, humidity, temperature, and wind speed, the complex mathematics of long-range ballistics translating instantly into minute adjustments to her scope. The village remained eerily silent as dawn approached. Then, just as the first rays of sunlight crested the eastern mountains, 3 black-clad figures emerged from the schoolhouse where Miller had disappeared. They moved with the distinctive precision of American Special Operations Forces, escorting a 4th figure whose face was concealed by a hood. A high-value target extraction. Just as she'd suspected. But what the American team clearly didn't know was that they were walking into a perfectly executed trap. 91 enemy combatants waited in concealed positions, ready to unleash devastating crossfire the moment the Americans reached the planned extraction point. Olivia keyed her radio, hoping to warn the team, but received only static in response. Someone was jamming all communications in the area. In that moment, Sergeant Olivia Keller faced a devastating choice: remain hidden and watch an American team be slaughtered, potentially sacrificing whatever crucial intelligence the hooded figure possessed. Or reveal her position by taking action, exposing herself to both the enemy force and the classified operation she was never supposed to know about. The mathematics of the situation were brutally clear. One sniper, even an exceptional one, against 91 enemy combatants. The logical conclusion was inescapable. Intervention meant certain death. But as the American team moved closer to the ambush point, Olivia remembered the faces of her 4 teammates who had died in that previous ambush years ago. She remembered the weight of survivor's guilt that had followed her across 3 continents. She made her decision. Through her scope, she identified the most immediate threat: a heavy machine gun position on the northern ridge that would have a clear firing line on the American team in exactly 73 seconds. Based on their current pace, Olivia took a deep breath, exhaled halfway, and squeezed the trigger with mechanical precision. The shot echoed across the valley like a thunderclap, instantly killing the machine gunner before he could react. In the moment of confusion that followed, Olivia executed a rapid series of follow-up shots, eliminating 3 more key enemy positions before they could identify her location. The mathematics of ballistic trajectories, wind compensation, and bullet drop calculations flowed through her mind with crystalline clarity. Each shot was a complex equation solved in milliseconds, each trigger pull perfectly timed between heartbeats. but physics was unforgiving. The enemy force quickly triangulated her position and began returning fire, forcing her to relocate rapidly across the ridgeline. As bullets impacted around her, Olivia maintained her methodical precision, prioritizing targets that posed the greatest threat to the American extraction team. 8 minutes into the engagement, Reynolds returned with news that air support was 30 minutes out, far too late to make a difference. The young corporal's eyes widened as he witnessed Olivia's impossible shooting performance, her rifle cracking in a steady rhythm that defied human limitations. "How are you calculating those shots so quickly?" he gasped as she eliminated a target at 475 meters, well beyond the M24's effective range under normal conditions. Olivia didn't respond. Her entire consciousness had narrowed to the task at hand, identifying threats, calculating solutions, executing with precision. The complex mathematics of wind drift, Coriolis effect, humidity variables, and bullet energy degradation flowed through her mind in an unbroken stream. 17 minutes into the engagement, the American extraction team had reached cover near the village center, but remained pinned down by concentrated enemy fire. Despite Olivia's extraordinary shooting, the remaining enemy forces had established interlocking fields of fire that made movement suicidal. The mathematics remained brutally clear. One sniper, no matter how skilled, could not overcome such overwhelming numerical superiority. Then Olivia spotted something that changed the equation. The enemy force had deployed a mobile command center behind the southern ridge, a modified truck with advanced communications equipment. Based on the enemy's disciplined responses, she deduced this was their tactical coordination center. The shot was nearly impossible, 890 meters, through gusting crosswinds with significant bullet drop over that distance. The M24 wasn't designed for such extreme range engagement, but Olivia wasn't calculating like a normal sniper. Her mind processed variables that others couldn't even identify: the microscopic expansion of the rifle barrel from previous shots, the exact density variation of the air across the valley, the infinitesimal gravitational differences at their current elevation. She made 7-minute adjustments to her scope, each one representing a complex calculation that would have taken a ballistics computer several seconds to process. One shot. One mathematical solution that might change the equation of survival. Olivia took a deep breath, visualized the bullet's exact trajectory through three-dimensional space, and squeezed the trigger with perfect mechanical precision. The bullet traveled for 27 seconds, its path arcing through space exactly as she had calculated. It struck the communications array on the command vehicle with surgical precision, disabling the enemy's tactical coordination capabilities instantly. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Without centralized command and control, the disciplined enemy force fragmented into isolated units, their coordinated fire patterns dissolving into ineffective individual actions. 23 minutes after Olivia's first shot, the extraction team reached their fallback position with the hooded, high-value target. 37 minutes after the first shot, helicopter gunships appeared on the horizon, forcing the remaining enemy combatants to retreat into the surrounding mountains. As medical evacuation helicopters landed in the village center, Olivia and Reynolds made their way down from their position to join the extraction. The Special Operations Team leader, a grizzled veteran with piercing eyes, approached her with an expression of barely concealed shock. "Sierra 1-1?" he asked, using her official call sign rather than her name. Olivia nodded, her rifle still warm against her shoulder. "That was you on the ridge line?" He shook his head in disbelief. "Command told us we were completely on our own until air support arrived. How did you calculate those shots? That last one was nearly 2 kilometers through variable winds." Before she could respond, the team leader was called away to secure the high-value target for transport. But as he turned to leave, he said something that sent a chill through Olivia's exhausted body. "Nightshade protocols have been reactivated." Full briefing at Bagram. As the helicopters lifted off, carrying the Special Operations Team and their mysterious captive, Olivia stood in the dust of their departure, the weight of her rifle suddenly heavy in her hands. 8 years of carefully constructed military anonymity potentially crumbled in the dust cloud rising from the helicopter rotors. She knew exactly what awaited her at Bagram Air Base. The same people who had promised her that Nightshade was officially decommissioned. The same people who had sworn that her classified past would never follow her back to the conventional forces where she'd finally found some measure of peace. But as the sun climbed higher over the Afghan mountains, Sergeant Olivia Keller realized that tomorrow would bring visitors she had prayed she would never see again. The kind of dangerous visitors who don't arrive in standard military transports. The kind who come in unmarked aircraft, with classified orders and unlimited authority. The kind who don't take no for an answer. At exactly 1,300 hours the next day, an unmarked C-17 transport aircraft touched down at Bagram Air Base. No flight plan had been filed. No arrival announced. 6 figures in civilian clothing emerged from the aircraft and walked directly to the Secure Operations Center without passing through standard security protocols. Olivia had been expecting them. She'd spent the sleepless night preparing mentally for this moment, knowing that her carefully constructed military career was about to be torn apart. She stood at parade rest outside the command office, watching as the figures approached with the measured pace of people accustomed to authority beyond question. A tall woman in her 50s led the group, her silver hair cut in a severe style that matched her expression. When she spoke, her voice carried the unmistakable authority of someone who regularly made life-and-death decisions affecting national security. Nightshade 7. It's been 3 years, 4 months, and 16 days. She didn't offer her name. She didn't need to. Colonel Elizabeth Vance, director of the Asymmetric Warfare Group's most classified division, was not someone Olivia would ever forget. Your ballistics calculations yesterday exceeded our most advanced predictive algorithms. 91 hostiles, 37 confirmed eliminations from your position, including a 2-kilometer shot through variable winds that our best computer models rated as a statistical impossibility. Colonel Vance paused, letting the weight of her words settle in the air between them. We need you back, Olivia. This isn't a request. Olivia remained silent for a long moment, studying the faces of the 6 officials surrounding her. She recognized the look in their eyes. A mixture of desperation and calculation, the expression of people who'd exhausted their conventional options, and were now reaching for weapons they'd once deemed too dangerous to use. The target you helped extract yesterday wasn't just another high-value terrorist, Colonel Vance continued. He's a nuclear physicist who defected from an adversarial weapons program with critical intelligence. The enemy force wasn't standard insurgents. They were Spetsnaz-trained operatives working through cutouts and private military contractors. Vance gestured to a junior officer, who handed Olivia a secure tablet displaying classified satellite imagery of a remote mountain complex. This is why they want him back so desperately. And this is why we need Nightshade operational again. The images showed what appeared to be a hardened underground facility built into a mountainside in a remote border region. Even with her untrained eye, Olivia could identify the distinctive features of a nuclear development site: specialized ventilation systems, radiation containment structures, and the unmistakable security perimeter that surrounded such facilities. How many other Nightshade operatives have you reactivated? Olivia asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. You're it, replied a tall man with close-cropped gray hair who stood slightly behind Vance. General Marcus Reynolds, Joint Special Operations Command. The program was officially terminated after the Kazakhstan incident. You're the only surviving operative with the specific skill set we need. The Kazakhstan incident. The mission that had killed her 4 teammates and left her with a bullet wound and crushing survivor's guilt. The classified operation that had gone catastrophically wrong because of intelligence failures at the highest levels. Colonel Vance stepped closer, lowering her voice. What happened 3 years ago was a tragedy, Sergeant Keller. But it wasn't your fault. The intelligence your team received was deliberately compromised by a mole within our organization. Olivia felt the ground shift beneath her feet. For 3 years, she'd carried the weight of those deaths, analyzing every decision she'd made, every shot she'd taken, every calculation that might have saved her team if she'd been faster, more accurate, more prescient. We identified the mole 6 months after you transferred out, General Reynolds added. He's been neutralized, but the damage was extensive. Several of our most sensitive operations were compromised, including the entire Nightshade program. Vance handed her another tablet, this one displaying personnel files with most details redacted. These are the people who died because of that compromise. Not just your team in Kazakhstan, but operatives across 3 continents. 37 American specialists lost because one man sold information to the highest bidder. Olivia studied the faces on the screen, recognizing several from joint operations she'd supported during her time with the program. The weight of this revelation settled over her like a physical burden. "Why tell me this now?" she asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil within. "Because we need Nightshade operational again," Colonel Vance replied without hesitation. "And because you deserve to know that what happened wasn't your failure. It was ours. The system failed you and your team, not the other way around." For 3 years, Olivia had believed that her teammates had died because she hadn't been good enough. Her calculations not precise enough. Her shots not quick enough. Her tactical assessments not accurate enough. Now she understood that no amount of skill or preparation could have saved them from a trap designed by their own command structure through a breach in security. "The facility you see in those images," General Reynolds continued, "houses technology that could alter the strategic balance of power in ways we cannot allow. Based on what our defector has told us, they're 6 months away from operational capability. Once that happens, the window for intervention closes permanently." The weight of this revelation crashed down on Olivia like a physical blow. She closed her eyes and saw the faces of her fallen teammates. Rachel, Michael, Dominic, and Kate. They died because the system had failed them. Now more people would die if that system failed again. "If I do this," she said quietly, "afterward you shut down Nightshade permanently. No more reactivation, no more special assignments, no more using people up and discarding them when they're broken. My record gets cleared, my identity secured, and I choose my next assignment without interference." Colonel Vance exchanged glances with General Reynolds, then nodded grimly. "Agreed. But first, we need to neutralize that facility before its technology becomes operational." As they prepared to brief her on the mission parameters, Olivia took one last look around the dusty base that had been her home for the past 14 months. She'd found a kind of peace here, in the predictable rhythms of military life, in the straightforward mathematics of standard range shooting that required only a fraction of her true capabilities. She'd known this day would come eventually. Her skills were too valuable, too specialized to remain buried forever. But this time, she wasn't a traumatized soldier trying to prove herself. She was a woman who'd found peace and precision and was willing to risk everything to prevent a strategic catastrophe. The team transported her via secure helicopter to a classified operations center buried deep within Bagram Air Base, a facility that didn't appear on any official maps. As they descended into the reinforced bunker complex, Olivia noted the extreme security measures with professional detachment. Retinal scanners, voice pattern recognition, and weight-sensitive floor panels that could detect the slightest deviation in an individual's gait. This wasn't standard military protocol. This was the kind of security reserved for operations that officially didn't exist. Inside the command center, a diverse team of specialists had assembled around a holographic terrain model of the target facility. Olivia recognized the distinctive work styles of various elite units, the methodical precision of Delta Force operators, the analytical focus of intelligence specialists, the technical expertise of advanced weapons technicians. "The facility is built into a mountainside in the Wakhan corridor," explained Major Sarah Donovan, the operations intelligence officer. "Multiple hardened layers, redundant security systems, and approximately 200 security personnel with military training." Olivia studied the holographic display, her mind automatically calculating angles, distances, and fields of fire. The facility had been deliberately positioned to minimize external vulnerabilities. No direct line of sight to critical areas, multiple overlapping security zones, and natural terrain features that channeled any approaching force into predetermined kill zones. "Standard infiltration tactics won't work," she observed, manipulating the holographic display to highlight the defensive positions. "They've positioned anti-personnel measures here, here, and here, with overlapping fields of fire that eliminate any conventional approach vector." Major Donovan nodded grimly. "That's why conventional options have been deemed unfeasible. A direct assault would result in unacceptable casualties and give them time to destroy critical evidence. An airstrike might not penetrate the hardened sections of the facility where the most sensitive technology is located." "What about the thermal exhaust port?" asked a young technical specialist, pointing to a narrow opening on the eastern side of the facility. "If we could place a precision munition there." "Star Wars was a movie, Lieutenant," General Reynolds interjected dryly. Real-world weapons facilities don't have convenient exhaust ports that lead directly to their reactor cores. The room fell silent as everyone contemplated the seemingly impossible parameters of the mission. Then Olivia spoke, her voice quiet but clear. There is a way in, but it requires mathematics that most people would consider impossible. She stepped forward and manipulated the holographic display, highlighting a specific section of the mountainside above the facility. This geological formation is unstable, microfractures in the rock face that aren't visible to standard imaging. A precision impact at this exact point, delivered with sufficient kinetic energy at precisely the correct angle, would trigger a localized rock slide that would appear natural. Colonel Vance studied the indicated position skeptically. That's nearly 3 kilometers from the nearest viable firing position, through a mountain valley with unpredictable wind patterns. No weapon system we have could deliver that kind of precision at that range. A Barrett M82A1 with custom-loaded match-grade ammunition could, Olivia replied, in the hands of someone who can calculate the exact atmospheric conditions, bullet drop, wind drift, and kinetic energy transfer required. The rock slide would temporarily disable these 3 security systems, creating a 4-minute window for a small infiltration team to breach the outer perimeter here. The room had gone completely silent, all eyes focused on Olivia as she continued to manipulate the holographic terrain. Once inside, the team would have approximately 12 minutes to reach this access point before internal security protocols reset. The entire operation depends on the precision of that initial shot. If it impacts with too much energy or at the wrong angle, it triggers a larger geological event that could compromise the entire facility. Too little energy or the wrong placement, and the security systems remain active. General Reynolds studied her with newfound respect. You're talking about calculations that our best ballistics computers can't perform with that level of precision. The variables are too numerous, too complex. I'm not a computer, Olivia replied simply. I can account for variables that machines don't even recognize exist. For the next 6 hours, the team refined the operational plan based around Olivia's unprecedented shooting capability. Every aspect of the mission was calibrated to the split-second timing that her initial shot would enable. If she succeeded, a small Delta Force team would have a narrow window to infiltrate the facility, secure critical intelligence, and plant charges to destroy the most sensitive technology. If she failed, the entire operation would collapse before it began, with potentially catastrophic strategic consequences. As the planning session concluded, Colonel Vance took Olivia aside. I need to know with absolute certainty, can you make this shot? Not just hit the target, but deliver the exact kinetic impact required, at precisely the right angle, to trigger the specific geological effect we need? Olivia met her gaze steadily. 3 years ago, I would have said yes without hesitation, because I had something to prove. Now I understand the true cost of overconfidence. She paused, considering her answer carefully. The shot is at the extreme edge of human capability. The mathematics involved exceed what most people can comprehend. But yes, I can make it. Not because I'm arrogant, but because I understand exactly what will happen if I don't. The infiltration team deployed 36 hours later, transported via stealth helicopter to a remote landing zone 50 kilometers from the target facility. From there, they traveled on foot through treacherous mountain terrain, avoiding known patrol routes and surveillance systems. Olivia moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had done this many times before, carrying her specialized equipment with practiced ease. The custom Barrett rifle had been modified to her exact specifications, each component precision machined to eliminate even microscopic inconsistencies that might affect accuracy. The ammunition had been hand-loaded under her direct supervision, each round a masterpiece of ballistic engineering. The brass case, powder charge, and projectile, all calibrated to her mathematical models for this specific shot under these specific conditions. 28 hours after deployment, the team reached the designated firing position, a narrow ridge overlooking the valley that led to the target facility. As the Delta operators established security and communications, Olivia began methodically setting up her shooting platform. Every movement was precise, every adjustment calculated to eliminate variables that might affect her shot. The tripod was leveled to within 1/10 of a degree. The rifle was secured and tested for any shift that might occur during firing. Her custom-designed meteorological equipment measured wind speed, air pressure, humidity, and temperature at multiple points between her position and the target. "You've got a 3-hour window before the facility's shift change," Major Donovan reminded her through the secure communications system. "After that, the increased movement of personnel will make the infiltration significantly more dangerous." Olivia acknowledged the information without breaking her concentration. Time was just another variable in her calculations. Important, but no more critical than the hundreds of other factors she was processing simultaneously. For the next 2 hours, she observed, not just looking through her scope, but absorbing the patterns of the environment around her. The subtle shifts in wind direction as air currents moved through the valley. The gradual temperature changes as the sun's angle shifted. The almost imperceptible vibrations in the earth beneath her position. Where another sniper might have seen obstacles, Olivia saw data points. Each environmental factor fed into her mental calculations, building a 4-dimensional model of the bullet's path through space and time. 1 hour to shift change, came the update in her earpiece. Olivia made a final series of minute adjustments to her scope, each one representing mathematical calculations so complex that they would require supercomputers several minutes to process. Her mind worked through differential equations that accounted for the Coriolis effect, the Earth's curvature, the microscopic expansion of the rifle barrel from ambient temperature, and dozens of other variables that conventional ballistics ignored. 30 minutes to shift change. She took a deep breath, her heartbeat slowing as she entered the peculiar mental state that had made her the most extraordinary shooter the Nightshade program had ever produced. Her consciousness expanded, perceiving patterns and relationships in the environment that others couldn't comprehend. The shot she was about to attempt would have been deemed mathematically impossible by conventional ballistics experts. 3 kilometers through variable mountain winds, striking a geological formation with precisely calibrated force at exactly the correct angle to trigger a specific localized effect without causing a larger catastrophic event. 1 shot. 1 solution. 1 chance to prevent a strategic disaster. 15 minutes to shift change. Olivia exhaled slowly, her fingers settling on the trigger with perfect pressure. Not enough to fire, but exactly the amount needed to eliminate any movement when she made the final decision to shoot. Through her scope, she could see the target area with preternatural clarity. The subtle variations in the rock face, the nearly invisible stress fractures in the geological formation, the precise point where kinetic energy would need to be applied to achieve the desired effect. 10 minutes to shift change. The world around her seemed to slow, her perception expanding to encompass the entire valley system. She could feel the air currents moving across her position, sense the minute vibrations in the earth, hear the subtle shifts in the acoustic environment that signaled changes in atmospheric conditions. In this expanded state of awareness, Olivia made 7 final microscopic adjustments to her aim point, each one reflecting calculations so precise that she couldn't have explained them to another human being. They existed in a mathematical realm beyond conventional language. 5 minutes to shift change. Infiltration team in final position. Olivia took 1 last breath, held it for exactly 2.7 seconds, then released half of it in a controlled exhale. In the perfect stillness between heartbeats, she applied the final 12 grams of pressure to the trigger. The Barrett fired, its massive recoil absorbed by the precision-engineered platform. The 50 caliber round left the barrel at exactly 2,799 feet per second, beginning its 3-kilometer journey toward the target. For 4.32 seconds, the bullet traveled through space, its path affected by wind currents, gravity, air density, and a dozen other variables that Olivia had calculated with inhuman precision. It struck the geological formation exactly 0.7 millimeters from her intended impact point, a degree of accuracy that defied conventional ballistic mathematics. The effect was immediate and exactly as she had predicted. A localized disruption in the rock face triggered a cascading failure along the natural stress lines in the formation. A section of the mountainside approximately 2 meters wide and 3 meters tall broke free, sliding downward with gathering momentum. The resulting debris impacted precisely the 3 security system components Olivia had identified, disabling them without alerting the facility's central monitoring systems. To anyone inside, it would appear as nothing more than a minor natural occurrence, one of many in this geologically active region. Target effect achieved, reported the Delta team leader. Security systems showing localized failure consistent with predictions. Proceeding with infiltration. Olivia maintained her position, her breathing steady as she watched through her scope. The Delta operators moved with ghost-like efficiency, exploiting the precise gap in the security perimeter that her shot had created. Outer perimeter breached. Proceeding to secondary objective. For the next 11 minutes, Olivia remained absolutely motionless, her rifle trained on the facility entrance, ready to provide covering fire if the infiltration team encountered unexpected resistance. Through her earpiece, she could hear the clipped, professional communications of the operators as they moved deeper into the facility. Primary objective secured. Initiating data transfer. Secondary objective located. Placing charges. Hostile contact. 3 neutralized silently. Proceeding. Data transfer complete. Beginning extraction. Charges set. 15-minute timer activated. 14 minutes after entry, the Delta team emerged from the facility and began their rapid exfiltration along the predetermined route. No alarms had been triggered. No reinforcements had been called. As far as the facility's security forces were concerned, nothing unusual had occurred beyond a minor rock slide on the mountainside. All objectives completed. Extraction proceeding as planned. As Olivia began methodically disassembling her rifle platform, she felt a strange sense of completion. The shot she had just made, a shot that conventional ballistics experts would have deemed impossible, had enabled an operation that would prevent incalculable strategic damage. Yet she felt none of the pride or satisfaction that might have accompanied such an achievement in her earlier career. There was only the quiet knowledge that she had performed her role with the precision it required, nothing more. 6 hours later, as the team reached the extraction point where stealth helicopters waited to return them to base, the facility behind them erupted in a precisely controlled explosion. The charges placed by the Delta team destroyed the critical technology while minimizing structural damage to the surrounding mountain, another calculation of extraordinary precision. The defectors' intelligence had been confirmed, the stolen technology had been neutralized, and Olivia Keller had once again demonstrated why the Nightshade program had considered her their most valuable asset. But as the helicopters lifted off, carrying them away from the operation zone, Olivia stared out at the darkened landscape below with a strange sense of detachment. She had returned to the world she had tried to leave behind, performed the impossible task they had asked of her, and now faced the uncertainty of what would come next. Colonel Vance had promised her freedom after this mission. A clean record, a secured identity, the right to choose her next assignment. But Olivia had learned through bitter experience that promises made in moments of operational necessity often evaporated when the crisis passed. The debriefing took place in the same secure bunker where the operation had been planned. For 3 hours, Olivia methodically detailed every aspect of her calculations, every variable she had accounted for, every minute adjustment she had made to execute the impossible shot. The assembled intelligence officers and military specialists listened with expressions ranging from skepticism to awe. What she described shouldn't have been possible according to conventional ballistic science. The mathematics involved exceeded what their most advanced computer systems could model. The data retrieved from the facility confirms everything our defector told us, General Reynolds announced as the debriefing concluded. They were 6 months away from deploying technology that would have rendered our early warning systems completely ineffective. Your shot made it possible to prevent that outcome, Sergeant Keller. Colonel Vance stepped forward, placing a sealed folder on the table before Olivia. As agreed, Nightshade has been permanently decommissioned. All operational files have been sealed at the highest classification level. Your record has been cleared of all references to the program, and your identity has been secured against future compromise. Olivia stared at the folder without opening it, her expression unreadable. And my next assignment? That's entirely your choice, Colonel Vance replied. Any posting, any specialty, anywhere in the world. You've more than earned it. For a long moment, Olivia remained silent, contemplating options she had never expected to have. Throughout her military career, her extraordinary mathematical abilities had always defined her path, always pushed her toward the most classified, most demanding roles where her unique skills could be exploited to their fullest potential. Now, for the first time, she faced true freedom of choice. I want to teach, she said finally, her decision crystallizing with absolute clarity. Advanced ballistics and mathematical modeling at Quantico. Not the classified techniques I used with Nightshade, but the fundamental principles that any sniper can apply to improve their capabilities. General Reynolds looked surprised. That's not what I expected. Your skills are extraordinarily rare, Sergeant. Are you certain you want to use them in a teaching capacity? Olivia met his gaze steadily. For 8 years, I've used my abilities to eliminate threats from impossible distances. I've calculated bullet trajectories that defied conventional mathematics. I've made shots that no one else on Earth could make. She paused, choosing her words carefully. But what happens when I'm gone? Do we just hope another mathematical prodigy appears? Or do we take what I've learned, the principles, not the classified techniques, and use it to elevate the capabilities of an entire generation of snipers? Colonel Vance studied her with newfound respect. You're thinking about legacy. I'm thinking about effectiveness, Olivia corrected gently. One exceptional shooter can change a single operation, but 100 well-trained snipers with improved understanding of advanced ballistic principles can change the strategic landscape. As she left the secure facility for the last time, Olivia Keller felt something she hadn't experienced in years, a sense of purpose that went beyond the next impossible shot, the next classified mission, the next life-or-death calculation. She wasn't just Nightshade 7 anymore, the traumatized specialist hiding from her past. She was Sergeant Olivia Keller, a woman who had found peace in the perfect mathematics of ballistic trajectories, and was now willing to share that knowledge to protect something larger than herself. The final chapter of her story was about to begin, and for once, she would be the one calculating its trajectory. 6 months later, the Advanced Ballistics Training Center at Quantico buzzed with a nervous energy that made the air feel electric. 24 Marine Scout snipers, all combat veterans with confirmed kills and exceptional service records, fidgeted in their seats as they awaited their new instructor. Rumors had circulated for weeks about the mysterious sergeant who had revolutionized the training program with mathematical approaches that defied conventional wisdom. I heard she calculated a shot in Afghanistan that changed the entire battle plan for Operation Granite Shield, whispered a staff sergeant to his colleague. 3 clicks through mountain winds hit a target the size of a playing card. His companion scoffed. That's physically impossible. No one can account for all the variables at that distance. The classroom door opened precisely at 0800 hours, and Sergeant Olivia Keller entered without ceremony. She wore standard Marine utilities with no special insignia or recognition badges. Nothing in her appearance suggested someone extraordinary. Average height, athletic build, and eyes that assessed the room with quiet intensity. "Gentlemen," she began without preamble, "everything you think you know about long-range ballistics is approximately 60% correct. The other 40% is what keeps you from making the truly impossible shots." She activated the classroom's projection system, displaying a complex mathematical formula that filled the entire wall. This is not theoretical physics. This is the reality of what happens to a 7.62 millimeters round, traveling through atmosphere at varying densities. Most of you were taught simplified versions of these calculations, because the full mathematics was deemed too complex for field application. She paused, looking each student directly in the eyes. I'm here to tell you that your capabilities are being artificially limited by that assumption. Your brains are more powerful calculation tools than you've been permitted to use. For the next 3 hours, Olivia methodically deconstructed conventional ballistics theory, introducing mathematical concepts that made several students shift uncomfortably in their seats. She wasn't just challenging what they knew. She was rebuilding their fundamental understanding of physics, atmospheric science, and precision shooting. After lunch, she led them to the 1,000-meter range where 24 rifles had been precisely arranged at the firing positions. The standard qualification for this distance gives you a 20-inch target, she announced. Today you'll be shooting at 5-inch targets. The wind is currently varying between 8 and 14 knots from multiple directions. You have 1 round each. The staff sergeant who had scoffed earlier raised his hand. "Ma'am, with these conditions, hitting a 5-inch target at this distance isn't realistic for a first attempt." Olivia's expression remained neutral. "The enemy doesn't care what's realistic, Staff Sergeant. They don't arrange themselves in 20-inch target circles because that's what you qualified on." She picked up the 25th rifle identical to those provided to the students and assumed a prone firing position. "Before you attempt your shots, I'll demonstrate the principles we discussed this morning." Without using a spotter, without checking wind flags, without any of the usual preparation time that snipers typically required, Olivia fired a single round. The distant target, barely visible to the naked eye, showed an impact precisely in the center. "That wasn't luck," she said calmly, standing and returning the rifle to its rack. "That was mathematics applied with discipline. You all have the capability to make that shot. Not today, perhaps not this month, but certainly by the time you complete this course." She gestured to the firing line. "Now it's your turn. Apply the principles we discussed. Treat the mathematics as seriously as you treat your weapons maintenance." None of the 24 students hit their targets that day, or the next. By the third day, 2 had managed glancing impacts on the edge of the 5-inch circle. By the end of the second week, half the class could consistently place rounds within the target zone. Major Paul Harrington, the training center's commander, observed from the sidelines with increasing amazement. After a particularly impressive session where students were successfully engaging targets at 500 meters in gusting winds, he pulled Olivia aside. "Sergeant Keller, what you're achieving here defies everything I've seen in 20 years of sniper training. These men are making shots that should be beyond human capability." Olivia shook her head slightly. "With respect, sir, they're making shots that were artificially defined as beyond capability. The limitations were never physical, they were conceptual." She gestured toward a young corporal who had just placed 3 consecutive rounds into a 4-inch target at 700 meters. Corporal Jenkins there grew up in poverty in rural Appalachia. He taught himself advanced trigonometry because he wanted to understand why his grandfather's hunting rifle shot differently on cold mornings. He never had formal mathematical training, but his brain naturally thinks in ballistic trajectories. The standard training program was actually inhibiting his natural abilities by forcing him to use simplified calculations. Major Harrington looked skeptical. "You're telling me that all these Marines are mathematical prodigies?" "No, sir," Olivia replied patiently. "I'm telling you that the human brain is capable of far more complex calculations than our training programs have acknowledged. We've been underestimating these men because it was administratively convenient to standardize the mathematics." 2 months into the program, word of Olivia's unconventional methods and her students' extraordinary results had spread throughout the Marine Corps sniper community. Senior officers from other branches began requesting permission to observe her classes. Intelligence officials with clearances Olivia recognized all too well appeared occasionally in the back of her classroom, taking careful notes. She ignored the attention and focused entirely on her students, pushing them beyond conventional limitations with a quiet intensity that brooked no excuses but offered unwavering support. During a particularly challenging night shooting exercise, Corporal Jenkins approached her with a question that went beyond ballistics. "Permission to speak freely, Sergeant?" Olivia nodded, continuing to adjust the specialized night optics she was preparing to demonstrate. "The shots you're teaching us to make, they're not standard Marine Corps sniper operations. These are the kind of calculations used in—" He hesitated, lowering his voice. "These are Tier 1 operations calculations, the kind used for high-value target elimination at extreme distances." Olivia's hands paused momentarily on the equipment, then resumed their precise adjustments. "Your observation, Corporal? Why teach us this? Why not keep these techniques classified for special operations units?" She considered his question carefully, recognizing the intelligence behind it. Jenkins wasn't just a natural ballistics calculator. He was perceptive about the wider implications of what she was teaching. "Because the next war won't be fought with the luxury of perfect intelligence and ideal shooting conditions," she answered finally. "It will be fought by ordinary Marines like you, making impossible decisions with incomplete information in chaotic environments." She finished mounting the optic and handed the rifle to him. "The future of warfare doesn't care about our organizational charts or our classification systems. It only cares about capability, and I believe in democratizing capability wherever possible." Jenkins accepted the rifle with a new understanding in his eyes. "Is that why you're here instead of elsewhere?" The perceptiveness of his question confirmed Olivia's assessment of his potential. "Precisely, Corporal. One exceptional shooter can only be in one place at one time. But 24 well-trained snipers who understand the true mathematics of ballistic trajectories can change the entire strategic equation." 4 months into the 6-month program, Olivia received visitors she had been expecting since the day she arrived at Quantico. 3 men in civilian clothing, their bearing unmistakably military despite their business attire, waited outside her office after the day's training concluded. Colonel Vance had sent her most persuasive recruitment team, men whose job was to identify and secure talent for operations that officially didn't exist. Sergeant Keller, the lead man, began without introducing himself. "Your work here has been noticed at the highest levels. The improvements in capability you've achieved with standard snipers exceed our most optimistic projections." Olivia gestured for them to sit, her expression neutral. "I assume this isn't a performance review." The man smiled thinly. "No, this is an opportunity. The techniques you're teaching here, the mathematical approaches, the environmental calculation methods, they clearly derive from your previous assignment." "Everything I teach is unclassified," Olivia corrected him firmly. "I've been extremely careful about that distinction." "Of course," he conceded smoothly. "But imagine what you could achieve in a more specialized environment, with students already operating at the highest levels of capability, with access to technologies that don't officially exist." He placed a folder on her desk. "We're establishing a new program. Completely compartmentalized, unprecedented resources, direct presidential authorization, the mathematics of precision kinetic effects in denied environments." Olivia didn't touch the folder. "You're rebuilding Nightshade under a different name." "We're evolving beyond Nightshade," the second man interjected. "The previous program was limited by available computing technology and outdated operational concepts. What we're proposing combines your unique mathematical approaches with next-generation systems that can extend human capability beyond anything previously achievable." The third man, who had remained silent until now, leaned forward. "Sergeant, the geopolitical situation has evolved significantly in the past 6 months. Capabilities we believed were theoretical are now being deployed in the field by our adversaries. The shots you're teaching these Marines to make, they're already becoming the minimum standard in certain theaters." Olivia listened without comment, her mind calculating probabilities and outcomes with the same precision she applied to ballistic trajectories. "Your current contract with the training center ends in 8 weeks, the first man continued. "We're offering you the chance to shape the future of precision warfare at the highest levels, with resources beyond anything available in conventional forces." "And if I decline?" Olivia asked quietly. The men exchanged glances. "Then we thank you for your service and wish you well in your future endeavors." "This isn't 2017, Sergeant. We don't disappear people who prefer to serve differently than we might wish." After they left, Olivia sat alone in her office, considering their offer with the detached analytical precision that had defined her military career. The folder remained unopened on her desk. She already knew what it contained. Exceptional compensation, unprecedented operational authority, technology that blurred the line between science and science fiction, and the return to a world of shadows, secrets, and isolation. Through her office window, she could see her students on the practice range, working well past standard training hours to master the techniques she had taught them. Corporal Jenkins was helping a struggling colleague adjust his calculations for the changing evening winds. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez was methodically teaching a group of 3 how to account for humidity variables in their trajectory models. They weren't just learning. They were teaching each other, extending and expanding on the principles she had introduced. The following week, Olivia implemented the final phase of her training program, something she hadn't included in the official curriculum submitted to Major Harrington for approval. She divided the 24 students into 4-person teams and presented them with a challenge that went far beyond standard sniper operations. For your final evaluation, each team will be assigned a specific strategic target on the extended range complex. These targets are positioned in locations that conventional ballistics would consider impossible to engage effectively. Extreme distances, complex wind patterns, obstructed lines of sight. She displayed a map showing 16 targets scattered across more than 20 square kilometers of rugged terrain. You will have 48 hours to develop a mathematical solution that allows you to engage your assigned targets simultaneously at precisely 1600 hours on Friday. Each team must determine the optimal firing position, calculate all relevant environmental variables, and place a single round on target at the designated time. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez raised his hand. "Sergeant Keller, some of these targets appear to be beyond 3 kilometers. with terrain features that create unpredictable wind conditions. The mathematics for those shots is exactly what you've been learning for the past 5 months, Staff Sergeant. Olivia finished for him. This isn't about demonstrating that you can hit what conventional wisdom says is possible. This is about redefining what's possible through rigorous mathematical discipline. For the next 2 days, the training center hummed with unprecedented energy as the 6 teams analyzed topographical data, calculated atmospheric models, and developed complex mathematical formulas to account for variables that standard sniper training didn't even acknowledge existed. Olivia observed without interfering, watching as her students applied and extended the principles she had taught them in ways that sometimes surprised even her. They weren't just reproducing her techniques, they were innovating, finding elegant solutions to problems she had deliberately designed to be just beyond their current capabilities. On Friday afternoon, as the teams deployed to their carefully selected firing positions across the range complex, Major Harrington joined Olivia in the observation post. "I've invited some guests for this demonstration," he informed her, gesturing to the convoy of vehicles approaching the range control building. "Word has spread about what you've achieved here. The Commandant himself is attending, along with representatives from Joint Special Operations Command and several intelligence services." Olivia nodded without comment. She had expected this. It was, in fact, part of her larger strategy. At precisely 1,600 hours, 24 rifles fired simultaneously across the range complex. 21 of the 24 rounds struck their targets, including all 8 targets that conventional ballistics doctrine classified as beyond effective engagement range. Corporal Jenkins' team achieved the most impressive result, successfully engaging a target at 200 meters through a mountain pass that created swirling, unpredictable wind patterns that changed direction vertically and horizontally along the bullet's flight path. As the distinguished visitors reviewed the results with poorly concealed amazement, Olivia quietly gathered her students back in the classroom for a final address. "Gentlemen, what you accomplished today isn't remarkable because of the distances involved or the complexity of the environmental conditions. It's remarkable because you demonstrated that so-called impossible shots are merely undercalculated shots." She looked at each of them in turn, seeing not just the snipers they had been when they arrived, but the mathematical pioneers they had become. The world is entering an era where precision kinetic effects will determine strategic outcomes. Not overwhelming firepower, not massive force deployment, but the ability to place the right round in exactly the right place at exactly the right moment. Corporal Jenkins raised his hand. "Will this training be expanded to all sniper schools, Sergeant?" Olivia allowed herself a small smile. "That decision is beyond my authority, Corporal. But each of you will return to your units with capabilities that exceed documented standards. How you apply those capabilities, how you share that knowledge, and how you continue to develop these mathematical approaches, that will determine the future of precision warfare more than any official program." Later that evening, as the distinguished visitors departed and the range fell silent, Olivia found herself alone at the 1,000-meter firing line where her program had begun 6 months earlier. The sun was setting behind the distant mountains, casting long shadows across the impact area where hundreds of thousands of rounds had been fired during her tenure. Major Harrington approached quietly, standing beside her as they both looked out across the darkening range. "The Commandant has authorized immediate expansion of your program to all Marine Corps sniper schools," he informed her. "And the Joint Chiefs are recommending implementation across all service branches." "You've started something revolutionary, Sergeant Keller." Olivia nodded, unsurprised by the news. "Mathematics doesn't care about service rivalries or bureaucratic boundaries, sir. It just is. The question now is what comes next for you," Harrington continued. "Your contract ends in 2 weeks. I have authorization to offer you a permanent position here, with promotion to Staff Sergeant and complete curricular control." He hesitated before adding, "Though I suspect others have made you more attractive offers." Olivia turned to face him, her decision already made with the same mathematical certainty she applied to everything in her life. "With respect, sir, I'm declining all offers to remain in a training position." Harrington looked genuinely surprised. "May I ask why?" "What you've built here is unprecedented." "Because the program no longer needs me," she replied simply. "What I've started here will continue to evolve beyond anything I could personally develop. The 24 Marines I've trained don't need me to tell them what's possible anymore. They're already calculating possibilities I haven't considered." She gestured toward the classroom building where lights still burned as several students continued working on their ballistic models late into the evening. Corporal Jenkins has already developed a mathematical approach to account for round-to-round manufacturing variations that exceeds anything I taught him. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez has created an atmospheric modeling system that operates on a standard tactical tablet and performs calculations I once believed required specialized equipment. Quote, "So what will you do instead?" Harrington asked. "I've requested reassignment to 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines," Olivia answered. "They're deploying to the Pacific Theater in 3 weeks as part of the new distributed operations strategy." Harrington looked perplexed. "As a sniper instructor?" "As a platoon sergeant in a standard rifle company," she corrected him, "leading 39 Marines with conventional weapons and standard equipment." "That seems like a waste of your extraordinary capabilities," Harrington observed carefully. Olivia shook her head. "The future of warfare isn't about individuals with exceptional skills, sir. It's about small units operating with distributed capabilities in complex environments." The mathematics of ballistic trajectories was just the beginning. The same principles apply to maneuver elements, to communications planning, to logistics optimization. She looked back across the darkening range, her vision extending far beyond the visible targets. The next conflict won't be won by solitary experts making impossible shots from distant positions. It will be won by small units of well-trained Marines making consistently correct decisions in chaotic environments. That's the real mathematics of warfare. Human factors, decision cycles, and probability analysis applied at the tactical level. As she walked away from the range for the final time, Sergeant Olivia Keller felt a sense of completion that went beyond personal achievement. What she had built here would continue growing, evolving, and spreading throughout the military's precision warfare community long after her name was forgotten. The 3 men in civilian clothing waited beside her car in the parking lot, a final attempt to persuade her to join their classified program. "You're making a mistake, Sergeant," the lead man said without preamble. "Your skills are wasted in a conventional infantry unit." Olivia regarded him calmly. "You're still thinking in terms of individual capability maximization. That's an outdated model for modern warfare." "Explain," he challenged. "The true power of mathematics in combat isn't about calculating the perfect shot from 3 kilometers away," she replied. "It's about distributing mathematical thinking throughout the entire force structure. 39 Marines who understand environmental analysis, probability assessment, and decision mathematics will achieve far more than one exceptional shooter, no matter how accurate." She unlocked her car door. Nightshade failed because it concentrated exceptional capability in isolated individuals. The future belongs to distributed capabilities in networked teams. That's the program I've actually been building here. Not just better snipers, but a new understanding of how mathematics applies to every aspect of modern combat. As she drove away, leaving Quantico and the sniper school behind, Sergeant Olivia Keller reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the classified shadows of Nightshade to the public triumph of revolutionizing precision shooting doctrine, her path had been defined by mathematics, not just the mathematics of ballistic trajectories, but the more complex calculations of human potential and organizational transformation. 3 weeks later, she stood before the 39 Marines of 2nd Platoon Echo Company in their final formation before deployment. They knew nothing of her background, nothing of Nightshade or the revolutionary sniper program she had created. To them, she was simply their new platoon sergeant, a combat veteran with a reputation for quiet competence. "The deployment we're about to begin isn't like previous operations," she told them, her voice carrying across the parade ground with quiet authority. "We'll be operating in distributed formations across vast distances, making independent decisions with limited communication and uncertain intelligence." She looked at each Marine in turn, seeing not just their physical capabilities, but the mathematical potential of their minds, the untapped capacity for precise decision-making under pressure. The difference between success and failure won't be measured in firepower or technology advantages. It will be measured in our ability to make consistently correct decisions in chaotic environments. That's the true mathematics of modern warfare, and that's what we'll master together. As the formation dissolved and the Marines moved off to complete their pre-deployment preparations, a young lieutenant approached her with obvious curiosity. That was an unusual pre-deployment speech, Sergeant Keller. Most platoon sergeants talk about combat readiness and unit cohesion. Olivia smiled slightly. Mathematics underlies everything, sir, from the trajectory of bullets to the psychology of unit cohesion. We just don't usually acknowledge it explicitly. Mathematics? The lieutenant looked confused. In infantry operations? Especially in infantry operations, sir, Olivia replied. The most successful Marines aren't just the physically strongest or the most aggressive. They're the ones who intuitively calculate probabilities, who understand complex environmental factors, who can process multiple variables simultaneously under extreme pressure. She gestured toward their platoon, busy with last-minute gear checks and equipment preparations. We just haven't been teaching them to recognize those calculations for what they are. That's about to change. The Pacific sun beat down mercilessly on the scattered islands of the training range as 2nd Platoon conducted their 3rd week of distributed operations exercises. 6,000 miles from Quantico and light years from the specialized world of precision sniper operations, Sergeant Olivia Keller moved among her Marines with the same methodical attention to detail that had once made her the military's most extraordinary shooter. "Your patrol formation is too predictable," she told Corporal Davis as she reviewed his squad's movement plan. "You're thinking in linear patterns, direct lines between cover points. The mathematics of movement through contested space requires non-linear thinking." Davis looked confused. "Mathematics, Sergeant? We're just planning a basic patrol route." Instead of answering directly, Olivia knelt and sketched a quick diagram in the sand. Imagine these points represent potential observation positions for an adversary with standard optical equipment. From these positions, what can they see? She quickly marked several overlapping arcs. Now calculate how many seconds your squad is visible within each observational arc based on your planned movement speed. Multiply that by the statistical probability of the observation position being occupied. Davis studied the diagram with growing comprehension. "So we're calculating exposure probability across the entire route?" "Exactly. Movement isn't just about getting from point A to point B. It's about understanding the mathematical relationship between time, space, observation probability, and risk distribution." For the next hour, Olivia worked with Davis's squad, teaching them to think about patrol planning as a complex mathematical problem rather than a simple tactical exercise. By the end of the session, they had developed a movement plan that reduced their theoretical exposure probability by 64% while maintaining the same operational timeline. Similar scenes played out across the training range as Olivia systematically introduced her Marines to a new way of thinking about infantry operations. She never explicitly mentioned her background in classified programs or advanced ballistics. Instead, she simply framed standard infantry tasks in mathematical terms that made intuitive sense to young Marines who had never considered themselves mathematically inclined. Lieutenant Moore, the platoon commander, observed these sessions with growing fascination. After watching Olivia transform a routine communications exercise into a lesson on signal propagation mathematics and frequency optimization, he finally asked the question that had been building for weeks. "Sergeant Keller, your approach is unlike anything I've seen in infantry training. Where did you develop these methods?" Olivia considered her answer carefully. "Mathematics exists everywhere in combat operations, sir. Most Marines are already performing complex calculations intuitively. They just don't recognize them as mathematics. I'm simply making the implicit explicit." Moore wasn't satisfied with this explanation. "That doesn't answer my question. Your background file shows standard infantry training with a secondary MOS in reconnaissance. Nothing that explains this level of mathematical sophistication applied to basic infantry tasks." "Perhaps my file is incomplete, sir," Olivia replied with a small smile. "Or perhaps I've simply had time to think about these problems differently." Before Moore could press further, their conversation was interrupted by the unmistakable sound of an approaching helicopter. This wasn't part of the planned exercise schedule. As the aircraft landed at the temporary command post, Olivia recognized the distinctive insignia of Fleet Marine Force Pacific Headquarters. A grim-faced colonel emerged from the helicopter and immediately requested a private meeting with Lieutenant Moore and Sergeant Keller. In the makeshift command tent, he wasted no time on pleasantries. 72 hours ago, a research vessel conducting underwater mapping operations near the Spratly Islands disappeared. 48 hours ago, we received a distress signal from a second vessel indicating they were being boarded by armed personnel. Then they went dark. The colonel activated a secure tablet displaying satellite imagery of a remote island cluster. Intelligence indicates both vessels and their crews are being held here, on Dao Hoa Island. It's officially uninhabited, but recent construction suggests it's being developed as an unacknowledged forward operating base. Lieutenant Moore studied the imagery with growing concern. These look like reinforced defensive positions, sir. Anti-aircraft emplacements, coastal defense systems. Correct, the colonel confirmed. Which is why a conventional rescue operation has been deemed unfeasible. The nearest carrier group is 4 days out. By then, the crews and any sensitive technology aboard those vessels will be long gone. He turned to face Olivia directly. Sergeant Keller, your name came up in a rather unusual context when this situation was being discussed at Pacific Command. Specifically, your experience with mathematical approaches to distributed operations. Olivia maintained a neutral expression, though inwardly she recognized the significance of this statement. Someone at PCOM knew about her background, not just Nightshade, but her recent work at Quantico. The island's defenses are oriented toward conventional threats, carrier-based aircraft, amphibious assault forces, or special operations insertions. The colonel continued. But your platoon is already in position on neighboring islands, operating in distributed teams with minimal electronic signature. Lieutenant Moore looked startled. Sir, with respect, we're a standard infantry platoon conducting training exercises. We're not equipped for a hostage rescue operation against a fortified position. I'm aware of your unit's official capabilities, Lieutenant, the colonel replied. I'm more interested in Sergeant Keller's assessment of your actual capabilities. All eyes turned to Olivia, who had been silently calculating probabilities and operational parameters since the briefing began. Her mind worked through complex mathematical models, not just ballistic trajectories this time, but multi-dimensional analyses of timing, movement, detection probabilities, and force distribution. Sir, conventional wisdom would say this operation is beyond our capabilities, she began carefully. But conventional wisdom relies on outdated mathematical models that don't account for distributed operations in complex environments. She stepped forward and manipulated the satellite imagery on the colonel's tablet, highlighting specific features of the island and the surrounding waters. Their defensive systems are optimized to detect and counter traditional approaches, air insertion, underwater delivery vehicles, or direct amphibious assault, but they're mathematically vulnerable to what they consider statistically insignificant threats. For the next 20 minutes, Olivia outlined an operational concept that made both the colonel and Lieutenant Moore increasingly uncomfortable with its unorthodox approach. She wasn't proposing a direct assault or even a covert infiltration in the traditional sense. Instead, she described a mathematically optimized distribution of minimal force elements approaching from multiple vectors, each individually too small to trigger defensive responses calibrated for larger threats. This violates every principle of force concentration in the manual, Lieutenant Moore objected. The manual was written for a different era of warfare. Olivia countered respectfully. Modern defensive systems use mathematical probability models to distinguish between background noise and actual threats. By distributing our approach across these 12 vectors, with precisely calculated timing intervals, we can exploit the statistical thresholds in their detection algorithms. The colonel studied her with newfound respect. This isn't standard infantry doctrine, Sergeant Keller. No, sir, she acknowledged. It's applied mathematics in a combat environment. The fundamental principle is that any detection system based on algorithmic threat assessment has mathematical vulnerabilities that can be exploited through precisely calculated counter-algorithms. After 2 hours of intensive planning, the colonel authorized the operation with significant reservations. I'm approving this because conventional alternatives would arrive too late, not because I'm convinced it will succeed. You have 18 hours to prepare. If you haven't secured the hostages by 0600 2 days from now, a carrier air wing will flatten that island regardless of who's still on it. As the colonel departed, Lieutenant Moore turned to Olivia with an expression that mingled respect with profound concern. Sergeant, what you're proposing, it's unlike anything I've ever seen in infantry operations. The level of mathematical precision required, the synchronization across distributed elements, is exactly what we've been training for over the past 3 weeks, sir, Olivia completed his thought. Our Marines already understand these principles. They just haven't applied them in a real-world operation yet. And if your calculations are wrong, if their defensive systems don't operate on the mathematical models you're assuming? Olivia met his gaze steadily. Mathematics doesn't care about our assumptions, sir. It simply is. Our task is to understand it better than our adversaries do. Preparation for the operation consumed the next 18 hours. Olivia divided the platoon into 12 four-man teams, each with a specific approach vector and precisely calculated timing sequence. Every aspect of the operation was framed in mathematical terms, not just movement routes and timing, but radio frequency selection, equipment distribution, and even the specific ammunition loads each Marine would carry. Private First Class Wilson, a 19-year-old from rural Kentucky who had struggled with basic algebra in high school, found himself calculating complex probability models for his team's underwater approach route. "I don't understand, Sergeant," he confessed during a preparation session. 3 weeks ago, I couldn't even compute average rates of fire properly. Now I'm doing calculations that look like advanced calculus." "Because now you understand that mathematics isn't abstract, Wilson," Olivia replied. "It's the language of reality. When your life depends on getting the numbers right, suddenly those numbers make sense in a way they never did in a classroom." At 0200 on the day of the operation, the 12 teams deployed from their various staging positions across 3 neighboring islands. Each team traveled by different means, some in small boats with muffled electric motors, others using underwater propulsion devices, still others approaching by more unorthodox methods that exploited specific blind spots in standard coastal defense systems. Olivia and Lieutenant Moore established a minimal command post on the highest point of the nearest uninhabited island, where they could observe the operation unfold. As the teams went dark for their final approach, Moore voiced the concern that had been building throughout the preparation phase. "Sergeant, your background file may be incomplete, but it's becoming increasingly clear that you have experience far beyond standard infantry operations. The mathematical models you've developed for this mission, they reflect knowledge of defense systems that isn't taught at any school I'm familiar with." Olivia monitored the tactical display without responding immediately. The first teams were approaching the island's sensor perimeter, the moment of truth for her calculations. "Sir, with respect, my background isn't relevant to the current operation. What matters is whether the mathematics is correct." On the tactical display, the first team crossed into what should have been the detection zone of the island's southern sensor array. According to conventional military assessment, alarms should have triggered immediately. According to Olivia's calculations, the four-man team's specific approach vector, speed, and minimal electronic signature would register as statistical noise in the automated detection algorithms. The display continued to show no alert status from the island's defenses. One by one, the 12 teams penetrated the sensor perimeter along their mathematically optimized approach vectors. None triggered the defensive systems that would have immediately detected a conventional force. "My God," Moore whispered as the reality of what they were witnessing sank in. "You've effectively rendered a state-of-the-art defense system blind through pure mathematics." "Not blind," Olivia corrected. "Just selectively perceptive. Their systems are still detecting our teams. They're just calculating that the statistical probability of what they're detecting being a threat is below their alert threshold." At precisely 0347, all 12 teams reached their designated positions around the island's research compound where the hostages were being held. Unlike a conventional operation that would have required extensive real-time coordination, each team knew exactly what actions to take at precisely what time intervals, creating a synchronized effect without active communication. From their observation post, Olivia and Lieutenant Moore watched as the operation unfolded with mathematical precision. The defensive force, approximately 60 personnel with advanced equipment, found themselves responding to simultaneous small unit actions across the entire compound perimeter. Their defensive protocols, designed for concentrated threats, fractured under the distributed pressure. By 0412, all 37 hostages had been secured. By 0439, The 12 teams had extracted from the island along mathematically optimized exfiltration routes that once again exploited the statistical thresholds in the defensive system's detection algorithms. Not a single Marine was lost. Total casualties among the opposing force: 3 wounded, none killed. As the rescued scientists and crew members were evacuated to a naval vessel that arrived 6 hours later, the colonel who had authorized the operation returned to the temporary command post. His expression as he reviewed the after-action data could only be described as stunned disbelief. "In 30 years of Marine Corps service, I have never seen an operation executed with this level of precision against these odds," he told Olivia and Lieutenant Moore. "Particularly not by a standard infantry platoon with no specialized equipment or advanced training." He fixed his gaze on Olivia. "Pacific Command is very interested in your mathematical approach to distributed operations, Sergeant Keller. There's already talk of establishing a new training program based on the principles you've demonstrated here." Olivia maintained her professional demeanor, but inwardly she recognized the pattern repeating itself. The specialized capability she had developed being identified, isolated, and institutionalized. The same process that had created Nightshade and other classified programs built around exceptional individuals. "Sir, with respect, what we accomplished wasn't the result of my individual capabilities," she responded carefully. "It was the product of 39 Marines applying mathematical principles to standard infantry tasks. The power is in the distribution of the capability, not in its concentration." The colonel studied her with new understanding. "You're suggesting that rather than creating a specialized program built around mathematical experts like yourself, we should be integrating these principles into standard infantry training." "Exactly, sir. Every Marine is already a mathematician. They just don't know it yet. The future of warfare isn't about exceptional individuals making impossible calculations. It's about distributed forces making consistently correct decisions based on mathematical principles they understand intuitively." 3 weeks later, 2nd Platoon returned to Camp Pendleton to find themselves the subject of intense interest from the highest levels of Marine Corps leadership. The classified nature of their operation meant they received no public recognition. But within military circles, what they had accomplished had sent shockwaves through the operational doctrine community. Lieutenant Moore found himself repeatedly summoned to briefings with generals and operational planners, eager to understand how a standard infantry platoon had executed an operation that would have challenged the most elite special operations units. He always gave the same answer: "Ask Sergeant Keller about the mathematics of distributed operations." But Olivia herself remained deliberately in the background, focusing on preparing her Marines for their next deployment, rather than explaining their success to increasingly senior audiences. When finally ordered to brief the commandant himself on her mathematical approach, she provided a clear, concise explanation of the principles without revealing anything about her background in classified programs. "The fundamental insight isn't new, sir," she explained to the Marine Corps' most senior officer. "It's simply that combat operations at every level are mathematical problems with calculable solutions. The difference is that we've stopped treating those calculations as beyond the capabilities of standard infantry Marines." The commandant, a decorated combat veteran with multiple tours in Afghanistan and Iraq, considered her words carefully. "What you're proposing would require a fundamental restructuring of how we train Marines from day one." "Yes, sir," Olivia acknowledged. "But the alternative is continuing to concentrate advanced mathematical capabilities in specialized units, while leaving the bulk of our forces operating with outdated conceptual models that don't reflect the reality of modern combat environments." 2 days after this briefing, Olivia received orders that surprised no one who understood the pattern of military institutional behavior. She was being reassigned to Quantico once again, this time to establish a comprehensive program integrating mathematical principles into all aspects of Marine Corps training. The orders came with promotion to gunnery sergeant and a personal note from the commandant indicating that this assignment represented the highest priority for the future development of Marine Corps operational capability. As she packed her modest belongings in the barracks at Camp Pendleton, Lieutenant Moore visited to express his mixed feelings about her departure. "The platoon won't be the same without you, Gunny," he said, using her new rank with genuine respect. "But what you've started here needs to spread throughout the Corps." Olivia paused in her packing, considering how to express what she had come to understand through her journey from isolated specialist to platoon sergeant. "Sir, what I've learned over the past year is that true capability isn't about individual excellence, it's about distributed competence. One Marine who can calculate a 3-kilometer shot in swirling winds is impressive, but strategically limited. 39 Marines who understand the mathematical principles of their environment are transformative. Moore nodded slowly. I've been thinking about something you said during the operation planning, about how modern defensive systems use mathematical probability models that can be exploited through counter-algorithms. That applies to more than just island defenses, doesn't it? It applies to everything in the modern battle space, Olivia confirmed. Air defense networks, cyber operations, electronic warfare systems, logistics chains, they're all fundamentally mathematical constructs. And anything built on mathematics can be understood, predicted, and countered through superior mathematical thinking, which is why they're sending you to remake Marine Corps training from the ground up, Moore concluded. Olivia closed her sea bag with a decisive movement. Not me alone, sir. The 39 Marines of 2nd Platoon proved that this isn't about exceptional individuals. It's about transforming how ordinary Marines think about the problems in front of them. The morning of her departure, Olivia found the entire platoon formed up outside the barracks despite the early hour. As she approached with her gear, they came to attention with a precision that reflected not just military discipline, but a deeper understanding of why that precision mattered. Corporal Davis stepped forward from the formation. Gunny, the platoon wanted to give you something before you left. He handed her a small wooden box, handcrafted with remarkable attention to detail. Inside was a brass compass unlike any standard military issue, its face marked with mathematical symbols rather than standard directional indicators. We had it made by a master craftsman in Oceanside, Davis explained. The symbols are the key mathematical principles you taught us. The platoon thought you should have something to remember that what happened here wasn't just about one operation or one deployment. It was about changing how Marines think about warfare itself. Olivia accepted the gift with uncharacteristic emotion, recognizing in this simple object the validation of everything she had worked toward since leaving the isolated world of classified operations. Mathematics doesn't care about our rank or our specialized training, she told the assembled Marines. It simply is. Your ability to understand and apply it in complex environments will save lives and accomplish missions that others would consider impossible. Not because you're special, but because you see the patterns that have always been there. As her transport departed Camp Pendleton, carrying her toward the next phase of her unconventional career, Gunnery Sergeant Olivia Keller reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the isolated precision shooter calculating impossible trajectories alone, to the platoon sergeant helping 39 ordinary Marines understand the mathematics of their environment, she had discovered something profound about the future of warfare. The greatest weapon wasn't a specialized sniper rifle in the hands of an exceptional individual. It was distributed mathematical thinking in the minds of ordinary Marines making thousands of correct decisions across a complex battle space. 6 months later, as the first class of instructors graduated from her new Mathematical Applications and Combat Operations program at Quantico, Olivia stood before them with the quiet confidence of someone who had finally found the right problem to solve. What you take back to your units isn't a specialized capability that belongs to an elite few, she told them. It's a fundamental perspective that belongs to every Marine. The ability to see the patterns, calculate the probabilities, and make decisions based on mathematical principles rather than rigid doctrine. A young sergeant raised his hand. Gunny, do you ever miss it, being the one who could make the impossible shot that changes everything? Olivia considered the question carefully, thinking back to that day in Afghanistan when 91 enemy combatants had surrounded a small village and her single shot had altered the course of a battle that conventional wisdom said could not be won. The mathematics of a perfect shot is elegant in its precision, she acknowledged, but the mathematics of 39 Marines making consistently correct decisions across a distributed battle space is beautiful in its complexity, and ultimately far more powerful. As the new instructors departed to transform Marine Corps training from the ground up, Gunnery Sergeant Olivia Keller opened the small wooden box containing the mathematical compass her platoon had given her. The brass face caught the afternoon sunlight, the mathematical symbols engraved upon it representing not just formulas and equations, but a new understanding of how ordinary people could achieve extraordinary results through distributed capability rather than isolated excellence. The most dangerous person on the modern battlefield wasn't the lone exceptional specialist making impossible calculations from a distance. It was the leader who could teach ordinary Marines to see the mathematical patterns in chaos, calculate probabilities under pressure, and distribute decision-making across a complex environment. That transformation, from the isolated specialist to the catalyst of distributed capability, was Olivia Keller's true legacy. Not the impossible shot that had once turned the tide of battle, but the thousands of correct decisions that would shape the future of warfare in ways that no single exceptional individual ever could. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.